Rachel Whitmore, 27, stared at the waiter as he whispered, "I'm sorry. Her card's been declined." Her mother, Diane, blinked. "What do you mean declined?" Her father looked down, pretending the wine list was fascinating. Just 3 hours earlier, Rachel had frozen her credit card from a bathroom stall, after funding 2 weeks of luxury for people who kept reminding her, "This trip isn't about you." Now. As silence fell over the table and eyes turned toward her, Rachel felt something unfamiliar, but thrilling control, and for once, she didn't give it back. "Before I tell you what happened next, let me know, where are you watching from today? If you've ever had to draw a line with family, tap like and subscribe. You're not alone in this. For as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one, the steady one, the one who kept her head down and did what was expected, even when no one said thank you." I grew up in a household where the word self-sufficiency was practically a family motto. My parents, Diane and Martin Whitmore, made sure I knew early on there would be no college fund, no safety net, no fallback plan. "We believe in raising strong daughters," my mother used to say, while booking her third spa weekend of the month. "We don't believe in handouts," my father added, moments before ordering another flat-screen TV on credit. By 12, I had opened my first savings account with birthday money. By 16, I was working at a local grocery store in Aurora, a quiet suburb outside of Denver, setting aside every paycheck for college. While my classmates used their allowances for concerts or new shoes, I was learning how to stretch $20 over a week's worth of lunches. It wasn't just about being responsible, it was about survival. My parents had made it clear if I wanted something, I had to earn it, but they never applied that standard to themselves. Our house always had new furniture, seasonal decorations, and the latest kitchen gadgets that no one used twice. The driveway was home to leased luxury cars we could barely afford. Meanwhile, I balanced 3 jobs through college, campus tutoring, bartending, and weekend retail, just to afford tuition and rent. I graduated with a degree in finance and a resume filled with hard-earned experience. No parties, no spring breaks, just discipline. By 27, I had built a stable life in downtown Denver. I was a senior financial analyst at a respected firm, with a modest condo, no student loans, and an emergency fund that could carry me through 6 months if needed. From the outside, it looked like I had it all together. And maybe I did. Except for one thing, I never figured out how to say no to my parents. Despite their beliefs in independence, Diane and Martin had no problem leaning on me when things got inconvenient. When my dad's investment property flopped, I covered their mortgage. When my mom's crown cracked during her Aspen trip, I paid the $7,500 dental bill without hesitation. Car repairs, taken care of. Emergency flights to Vegas for their friend's wedding, charged to my card. It wasn't always direct. My mom had a way of sighing just loud enough for me to hear, like the weight of their finances was a burden no one else could understand. My father liked to remind me, "You've always been good with numbers. That's your gift. Families help each other." What they meant was, I help, they take. And Claire, my younger sister, was the only one who seemed to understand what was happening. 2 years behind me in school. She saw the pattern early. After graduating, she moved to Seattle, stayed in touch but distant, and always had a polite excuse when money came up. She wasn't cold, she was careful, boundaried. Sometimes I envied her clarity, but I never followed her lead. Some part of me, a tangled mix of guilt and misplaced loyalty, kept saying maybe this time would be different. Maybe if I just did a little more, gave a little more, they'd see me not just as their safety net, but as their daughter. I was wrong. It started with a phone call on a quiet Tuesday morning. I was in my Denver apartment, sipping my first cup of coffee before logging into work. When my phone lit up with Mom, I hesitated for a moment, then answered, "Rachel, sweetheart." Diane began, her tone unusually warm, almost rehearsed. Your father and I have been talking, and we think it's time for a family vacation, something restorative. Just us, reconnecting. I didn't respond right away. The last time we had a family conversation was when they asked if I could co-sign a loan for a boat I'd never ride. She filled the silence. We're thinking Kauai. Gorgeous beaches, beautiful resorts. Time to heal. You know your father's been thinking about retirement. Claire's been distant. And we want to be together again. Like we used to. Like we used to. The phrase echoed in my chest, tugging at something soft and half forgotten. A memory of childhood birthday dinners, of movie nights before the financial requests started showing up like invoices in disguise. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like if they really meant it. If this was truly about connection, not cost. I said yes, not eagerly, not blindly, but with a cautious hope I couldn't quite kill. Maybe this was their olive branch. Maybe they'd finally see me as more than a balance sheet. I wanted to believe that people could change, even them. A week later, my inbox pinged with an email from my mom titled, Kauai Options. What do you think? Inside were links to 3 luxury resorts, all boasting ocean views, private bungalows, and on-site spas. We're leaning toward the third one, she added. I've already added your card to the reservation portal, just to hold it, just to hold it. I stared at the screen, heart dipping slightly. I knew that trick. It had been just to hold the anniversary dinner for her friends, just to hold the emergency flight to Palm Springs. But I shook it off. Maybe I was reading too much into it. This was different. She said it was about reconnecting. That night, I met Naomi at our usual cafe on Blake Street. She listened patiently as I walked her through the idea of the trip, showing her photos of the resort and even sharing a few of my own nervous hopes. Naomi stirred her chai slowly, eyes steady on mine. Rachel, I don't want to be the cynic here, but every time you think they're changing, they end up hurting you. Emotionally, financially. This sounds expensive and familiar. This time feels different. I insisted, not quite believing myself. They said it's about healing, about family. She raised an eyebrow. Did they mention who's paying? I hesitated. Not explicitly, but I'm sure we'll figure it out once we get there. Naomi leaned back, her silence louder than words. That's how they do it. No one says anything up front, so it's easier to guilt you later. If you go, set boundaries, real ones, and write down what you're willing to pay for. I will, I said. But even as I promised her, I knew deep down, I probably wouldn't. Because confrontation never worked with my parents. Somehow, it always ended with me apologizing, with them getting what they wanted. A few days before our flight, I called Claire to confirm some details. She answered from a noisy background. Her Seattle apartment. Maybe a cafe. I'm not coming, she said flatly. I couldn't get the time off. I paused. Claire, please. It won't be the same without you. She sighed. Don't you think it's a little convenient they want a luxury family vacation right after you mentioned your annual bonus? I swallowed hard. They said it's about family, sure. But they said that last time, too. And the time before that. You're not obligated to keep giving just because they never learned how to stop asking. I think it might be different this time, I whispered. Claire didn't argue. She just let the silence stretch until it was clear. She wasn't going to change my mind, and I wasn't ready to hear what she was trying to say. After we hung up, I packed my bags in silence. I tried not to think about Naomi's warning or Claire's refusal. I tried not to think about all the times I'd been burned. I told myself this trip could still be something real. That maybe, just maybe, this time would be the beginning of something new. But in the back of my mind, A quiet voice had already begun to whisper, "You've been here before." The first sign should have been the email confirmation. It came 2 days after our phone call. Subject line: Kauai trip booked. I opened it expecting to see a breakdown of shared reservations, maybe a friendly note about flight times. Instead, what I found was a receipt. One booking: 7 nights at a 5-star resort in Poipu, oceanfront suite, garden view room, multiple names listed, my credit card number, already charged for the deposit. I stared at the screen. My mother hadn't even asked. No text, no call, just assumption. And my card. I told myself it wasn't intentional, that she was just moving fast to secure the spot, that maybe she meant to call and forgot. The familiar mental gymnastics kicked in. Always the same pattern. Find a reason. Excuse the behavior. Avoid the confrontation. I closed the email and said nothing. The next day, I received a text. "Mom, exciting news. We invited a few friends to join us. Can't wait for you to see them again." Me. "What friends, Mom?" "Oh, you remember Barbara and Gerald from our old neighborhood, and Patricia and Donald. Martin plays golf with Donald. They've been wanting to visit Hawaii forever. This is the perfect chance. No question. No. Do you mind?" Just a cheery announcement that 4 strangers would now be part of what was promised to be a family trip. My hands tightened around the phone as I read and reread the message. I remembered those names vaguely from some long-ago barbecue when I was 16, people I hadn't seen or spoken to in over a decade. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, "Got it? Sounds unexpected." No reply. The next morning, I found myself staring at my suitcase on the floor. Still open, still half-packed. My stomach churned with something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Not just unease, but dread. And yet, I kept folding dresses, kept organizing toiletries, kept planning. Because that hope, the one I carried quietly inside me, wasn't dead yet. Maybe it would still be okay. Maybe the presence of others would take some of the pressure off. Maybe this was her awkward, clumsy way of expanding the circle. Maybe. I didn't bring it up when we spoke on the phone later that night. She called to ask if I had finalized my airport transfer. "We'll meet you at the gate," she said. "Everyone's flying in from different cities, but we'll all connect in L.A. Everyone." Another subtle shift. I wasn't traveling with them anymore. I was just one of the group. An individual unit expected to attach neatly to a collective I didn't help assemble. I asked if Claire had changed her mind. My mother laughed. "Oh, Claire. She always was the sensitive one. She says she's busy, but I think she just doesn't like being around people who challenge her." I said nothing. The call ended like most of ours do, with her rushing off to check something, someone calling in the background, and me left holding the echo of things unsaid. That night, I sat on my couch in the dark, the glow from my phone illuminating the reservation email. I scrolled through the charges again. The suite upgrades, the deposit for 7 guests, the line item labeled prepaid excursions. I hadn't approved any of it. But there it was, charged to my name, my account. Still, I didn't cancel. I didn't call to demand a change. I didn't ask for reimbursement. Because underneath all the red flags, all the signs I knew better than to ignore, there was still that sliver of longing, that small, stubborn hope that maybe they'd just gotten carried away. That maybe, once we arrived, we'd all sit together by the ocean and laugh like we used to. I'd been warned, more than once. But the truth is, when you've spent your whole life waiting to be chosen, even the illusion of belonging can feel like enough. And so, I packed. Carefully, quietly, willfully blind. The morning of our flight, I arrived at LAX 2 hours early. Habit, Really. I've always liked to be prepared, to give myself enough space to think, to breathe. I stood near the international check-in counter, sipping lukewarm airport coffee, suitcase at my side, and waited for them to arrive. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. I was starting to wonder if we'd missed each other when I finally spotted them coming up the escalator. My parents, Diane and Martin, smiling broadly, surrounded by their friends, all 6 of them, laughing, chatting, pulling coordinated luggage sets that looked far too expensive for a casual vacation. No one broke stride to greet me, no hug, no hi, sweetheart. My mother waved briefly, then called out, Rachel, be a dear and check us in, would you? Everything's under your confirmation number. It took me a second to register the words. My confirmation number. I walked to the kiosk, entering my details with numb fingers. An airline representative approached when the machine prompted a manual check. Miss Whitmore, she said warmly, glancing at the screen. Yes, you're traveling with a party of 7 today. Just confirming you're in seat 34B, and the rest of your party is seated in first class, 2A through 2F. I blinked. There must be a mistake. We're all together. She shook her head politely. The reservation shows 1 economy seat and 6 first-class upgrades, all booked under the same credit card, but the classes are split. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and took the boarding pass she handed me. Behind me, I could hear Diane laughing at something Gerald had said. My father was telling the group which wines to try on board. None of them looked back. I didn't ask. I didn't confront. I simply turned and wheeled my suitcase toward security, my feet moving on autopilot. But inside, something in me stung, quietly, deeply. The flight to Kauai was just over 6 hours. Long enough to think. Long enough to replay every choice, every warning I'd ignored, every moment that now felt like a breadcrumb I should have followed. While they sipped champagne behind the curtain, I sat cramped in a middle seat between a teenager playing loud music and a man who fell asleep on my shoulder before takeoff. I stared out the window at clouds that looked like crushed velvet and told myself not to cry, that it didn't matter, that seats were just seats, that this wasn't personal. But it felt personal, because someone had made a choice, a conscious, deliberate choice to separate me from them, to place me in coach while they toasted their good fortune in first class, all on my dime. It wasn't about the seat. It was about what the seat represented. I wasn't one of them. Not really. I was the organizer, the coordinator, the sponsor, and apparently, the only one not worthy of extra legroom. By the time we landed, my legs were stiff, my mouth dry, and my resolve unraveling. But as we exited the plane, Diane turned to me with her usual, effortless cheer. "Isn't Kauai beautiful?" she said. "Wait until you see the resort." And just like that, the moment was over. No apology, no acknowledgement, just the next expectation. I forced a smile, adjusted the strap of my bag, and followed them toward baggage claim. The sun was shining. The island air was warm, but I couldn't shake the chill in my chest. That evening, we gathered for dinner at the resort's oceanside restaurant, one of those places where the menus are leather-bound and the sunset feels choreographed. The staff greeted us like royalty. Our table, perched on a wooden terrace overlooking the water, was already set with wine glasses catching the amber light. Everyone else seemed relaxed, laughing, chatting, ordering cocktails without even glancing at the prices. I sat at the edge of the group, the only one with a garden view room, the only one who hadn't been offered champagne on the flight, now quietly calculating how much this meal was going to cost me. Appetizers arrived first. Ahi tartare, seared scallops, grilled octopus, then wine. Then more wine. I watched the bottle empty as my mother leaned back in her chair, her voice rising above the clinking of silverware. "I'd like to make a toast," Diane announced. lifting her glass with theatrical flair. To my daughter Rachel, whose incredible generosity made this entire trip possible. The table fell into a chorus of cheers. Gerald clapped. Patricia smiled wide. Donald raised his glass. All eyes turned to me, and I felt my face flush. Not with pride, but with disbelief. I froze, my wine glass halfway to my lips. I didn't agree to pay for everything, I said quietly, hoping to keep my voice steady, measured. I thought we'd be splitting costs. My mother's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. Don't be ridiculous. Rachel, she said, her tone suddenly sharp, cutting clean through the illusion. You're doing so well. Your father and I gave you everything growing up. This is the least you can do to show appreciation. Gerald chuckled and raised his glass again. To Rachel's success and generosity, he said, and the group echoed him without hesitation. I sat motionless. The humiliation spread slowly, like ink in water. My hands were cold, my breath caught, and still, no one looked twice. No one thought to ask if it was true. If I had really offered to pay for 6 other adults on a luxury vacation, because it didn't matter. My silence had written that check long before we boarded the plane. Later that night, I knocked on the door of my parents' suite, one of the oceanfront ones I'd unknowingly funded. Diane answered in a plush white robe, hair wrapped in a towel, skin glowing from whatever treatment the resort had provided. We need to talk, I said, voice low but firm. About expenses. I didn't agree to cover the entire trip. I didn't know you invited 4 friends. I can't afford to pay for everyone's meals and activities for 2 weeks. My father barely looked up from his phone. What's there to talk about? He muttered. You're a finance person, aren't you? You can figure it out. Diane crossed her arms, the smile long gone. You're making everything about yourself again. Rachel, this trip is about family reconnecting, not budgets. The irony of her words, spoken from a suite I was paying for, almost made me laugh. But instead, I just nodded once, slowly, and stepped away from the door. Back in my garden view room, I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the muffled sounds of the ocean outside. I should have said more, should have pushed harder. But old habits don't break in a night. I had been trained for years to absorb guilt, to carry weight that wasn't mine, and call it duty. They had raised me on the language of debt, emotional, financial, invisible. And tonight, they had simply decided it was time for me to pay up. The next morning, we boarded a catamaran for a group snorkeling excursion off the Napali coast. The sky was flawless, blue as glass, and the ocean shimmered like it had been painted. It should have been magical, but I knew before the boat even left the dock that I wasn't really there to enjoy it. I was there to document it. At the check-in kiosk, the tour guide glanced at his clipboard. Whitmore party of 7. Charges will be applied to the card on file. He nodded toward my mother, who pulled my credit card out of her beach tote as casually as if it were her own. I didn't even remember handing it to her. No one looked twice, not even me. During the sale, while everyone posed in their matching linen and sunglasses, I stood behind their phones. Rachel, can you get us with the cliffs in the background? Oh, wait. Take another. My hair was weird. One more. But horizontal this time. I obliged. I always did. The wind whipped my hair into my eyes as I adjusted for lighting. I didn't snorkel. I didn't sit down. I didn't get in a single photo. Instead, I floated between tasks, holding sunglasses, passing drinks, cleaning up wrappers. At one point, Patricia handed me her sarong and said, "Would you mind folding this? It keeps blowing away." No thank you. No acknowledgement. Just quiet expectation. It was the same that afternoon in Lahaina. We'd planned to browse the local art shops, maybe grab shave ice. But my mother led the group into a boutique lined with silk scarves and designer jewelry. "Oh, this would look lovely on you, Barbara," she cooed, holding up a hand-stitched shawl tagged at $180. Before I could step forward, she was already at the register, my card in hand. "Mom," I started. "Don't be petty." "Rachel," she whispered, low and firm. "These are our guests." The words hit like a slap I wasn't supposed to feel. Throughout the day, it continued. A pair of designer sunglasses for Patricia, a golf polo for Gerald, a pearl necklace for Barbara, a new watch for my father. The total mounted invisibly behind my calm expression. No one asked if it was okay. No one checked the balance. They just smiled, admired themselves in mirrors, and walked out with bags I had unknowingly purchased. I became invisible in the most painful way, not ignored, but used, present only to enable their enjoyment. That night, I returned to my room and opened my banking app. I didn't even want to see the number, but I forced myself to look. The charges had already begun stacking: shopping, tips, spa deposits, all flowing steadily from my account, drip by drip. I thought of the toast the night before, of the way my mother's smile had shifted the second I pushed back, of how easily the table had accepted her version of the truth, that I had offered all of this, that I was hosting, generously, lovingly, when in reality, I hadn't even been asked. They didn't see me as part of the experience. I was the machine behind it. The card swipe, the camera lens, the folded towel, the hand that paid so theirs wouldn't have to. As I lay in bed, the garden view outside my window dark and silent, I tried to remember the last time I'd felt like someone's daughter. I couldn't. It happened the next night, by accident. I had excused myself from dinner early, exhausted from another day of playing tour guide, treasurer, and invisible daughter. My head throbbed from too much sun and not enough silence, so I took the long way back from the restroom, hoping to breathe in the ocean air and maybe find a moment of peace. But just before turning the corner to the terrace, I heard my name. "Rachel owes us this trip," my mother was saying. I stopped mid-step, instinctively drawing back behind the stone column that framed the patio. "She does," Martin agreed, his voice casual, like he was talking about the weather. We poured everything into raising her: dance lessons, summer camps, private school applications, you name it. She always had more than enough, Diane added. "This is how children repay their parents now. It's not too much to ask." There was a murmur of polite agreement, clinking glasses, a few half-hearted chuckles. I stayed frozen in place, every muscle in my body tight, heart pounding against my ribs. Dance lessons: I had 2 months of ballet when I was 7, canceled because the costume deposit was too expensive. The summer camps. Those were paid for by my grandparents, the same ones my parents later claimed were too controlling to stay close to. And as for private school, I'd gotten in, on a scholarship. They refused to cover the remaining tuition. I'd spent high school working weekends at the grocery store, while my parents took wine-tasting weekends in Napa. I put myself through college while they sent postcards from Rome. I paid off my student loans while they remodeled their kitchen with imported tile. And now they sat at a luxury resort, sipping wine I'd paid for, telling a group of near strangers that I owed them. Not just financially, existentially. Something in me cracked, clean and sudden. The kind of break you don't hear until everything goes quiet. Because up until that moment, I'd always made room for doubt. Always left the door cracked open for the possibility that maybe I was wrong. That maybe I had misunderstood their intentions. That if I gave enough, proved enough, waited long enough, they would finally treat me like something more than a means to an end. But that door slammed shut. It wasn't misunderstanding. It wasn't miscommunication. It was a story they had written and told so many times that even they believed it, that raising me had been a burden, that I was in their debt, and that this trip was my repayment. They hadn't invited me to reconnect. They'd invited me to reimburse. I backed away from the patio, the laughter behind me growing softer with distance. Back in my room, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the shadows, letting the weight of it all settle. I remembered every missed birthday, every guilt-laden phone call, every time I had to cancel something for myself to wire them money just for now. I remembered being 22, working double shifts in Denver while they cruised the Mediterranean. I remembered asking for help with rent once, and being told I needed to learn to manage better. And now I understood. I was never their daughter in the way I had hoped to be. I was an asset, a source, a card in Diane's tote bag, a set of numbers in Martin's mental spreadsheet. That night, I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because for the first time, I wasn't confused. I finally saw the truth, clear and sharp. I was never the ungrateful one. I was just the only one who had been giving all along. The next morning, she knocked on my door at 7 a.m. Sharp, fully dressed in resort white, hair perfectly set, a bright smile already painted across her face. "Rachel," Diane said cheerfully, "we've booked spa treatments for the ladies. 4-hour packages for me, Barbara, and Patricia. They have an opening at 9. I blinked, still groggy from sleep. I didn't schedule that. "Oh, don't be difficult," she sighed, already stepping backward as if the conversation were over. "Just need your card. It's $1,800 plus gratuity. We'll see you at lunch." And just like that, she was gone. My card, already in her purse. My name, once again attached to a bill I never agreed to pay. But something felt different this time. Not rage, not even hurt, just stillness. I sat on the edge of the bed, robe half-tied, watching the morning light pool across the tile floor. Her words echoed, "Don't be difficult. This trip isn't about you." But for the first time, I heard them without their usual weight. They didn't land. They didn't pierce. Because I finally understood what she meant, and what I needed to do. A few hours later, we were seated at an oceanfront restaurant in Wailua, the kind with a live string quartet and $45 salads. Everyone was laughing, relaxed. My father ordered a bottle of champagne. Diane and her friends discussed upcoming spa treatments and which facial mask would best rejuvenate island skin. I sat at the edge of the table again, silent, detached, calm. "I need to use the restroom," I said quietly. No one looked up. Inside the cool, marbled restroom, I locked myself in the farthest stall and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady, my breath slow. I opened my banking app and navigated to card settings. There it was, freeze card, a simple button, one I'd never touched before, one I'd never believed I had the right to press. A pop-up appeared. "Are you sure you want to prevent all new charges? This action is immediate." I thought of the scarf Barbara wore last night, the one my card paid for. I thought of the wine, the tips, the private excursions. I thought of my mother's hand stretched out like it was owed something. And then I thought of my rent, due in 6 days. Of my carefully built savings account slowly bleeding out. Of Claire's voice over the phone. Of Naomi's warning. Of my own silence. I pressed confirm. A quiet ding. Card successfully frozen. No more charges. No more pretending. No more performance. I stayed in the stall a few extra seconds, letting the silence wrap around me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was drowning under someone else's expectations. I felt tall, solid, grounded. At the mirror, I reapplied lipstick with a steady hand and stepped back into the hallway. The sounds of the ocean filtered in through open windows. the clink of silverware, the low hum of conversation. I returned to the table with a smile, small, private, real. "Everything okay?" my father asked, barely glancing up from the menu. "Perfect," I replied, folding my napkin across my lap. Lunch continued, uninterrupted. More mimosas, more laughter, more jokes I didn't join. But I watched the clock tick toward the moment they'd ask for the check. And this time, I was ready. The moment arrived with practiced ease. We were seated at a seaside restaurant so pristine it looked like a magazine spread. Linen napkins, crystal glasses, servers who glided rather than walked. The table was full. My parents, their 4 friends, and me. Once again the quiet orbit around their loud son. My father ordered the most expensive bottle of champagne on the menu. Diane chirped about afternoon spa bookings. Patricia asked if I'd take more group photos before dessert. I smiled, nodded, lifted the camera when asked, sipped my water slowly. The waiter brought the check in a leather folder, placed it discreetly in front of my mother. She didn't even glance at the total, just pulled out my card, the frozen one, and slid it inside with well-practiced entitlement. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I simply waited. A few minutes later, the waiter returned. His smile was thinner now, his voice lower. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The card has been declined." Diane's smile faltered, the first crack in her polished exterior. "That's impossible," she said briskly. "Run it again." "I already did. Twice. It appears the card has been frozen." The table fell into a hush so heavy it seemed to still the breeze. My mother turned toward me, her voice a seething whisper. "Rachel, what is the meaning of this?" I looked up slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time all morning. "The card's been frozen," I said calmly, "because I didn't authorize these charges." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "Unfreeze it. Right now. Don't do this in front of everyone." "No," I replied, still soft, still measured. My father leaned in, voice tight. "You're making a scene." I looked around. 7 people staring at me, 6 of them stunned, one of them furious. I reached into my purse and pulled out a second card. "I'd be happy to pay for my portion of the meal," I said. "Just mine." Gasps weren't audible, but the silence was louder than anything. The waiter hesitated. "Madison," my mother hissed again. "My name weaponized now. You're embarrassing us." "No," I said, gently but firmly. "I'm embarrassing the lie. That I offered to pay for this trip. That I agreed to fund flights, rooms, spa packages, for people I didn't invite. That I somehow owe you for raising me." My father bristled. "We're family. Family supports each other. Family doesn't book first class for themselves and economy for their daughter. On her card." I said. Barbara glanced away. Patricia froze mid-sip. Gerald cleared his throat. "Family doesn't invite 4 friends to a vacation without asking," I continued. "Family doesn't call someone generous while secretly draining her accounts. Family doesn't tell her, 'This trip isn't about you,' and then use her to pay for every moment of it." I placed the card on the table. "This is for my meal. The rest is not my responsibility." And then I stood, smoothed the hem of my dress, nodded politely to the waiter, and walked out. Behind me, voices rose in a tangle of excuses and panic. The image of Diane fumbling for her wallet, Martin trying to signal the others, chairs scraping the floor. But I didn't turn around. For the first time in my life, I left them holding the bill, and I felt lighter with every step. I didn't go back to my room that afternoon. Instead, I walked straight to the front desk and asked to speak with the hotel manager. His name was Caleb, mid-30s, polished, with a kind professionalism that immediately softened the tension in my shoulders. "Is everything all right, Miss Whitmore?" he asked, motioning for me to step aside from the busy lobby. "Not exactly," I said, voice low. "I need to change my accommodations. I'd prefer something in another wing, something quieter, away from my current party." He didn't ask questions, just nodded once. "We have a private garden bungalow available. It's actually an upgrade, but under the circumstances, we can offer it at the same rate, within an hour." I was unlocking the door to a new space, smaller, but serene, clean lines, a private patio, a single bed with white linen that hadn't been invaded by anyone else's entitlement. I dropped my bags, sat on the edge, and let myself breathe, for what felt like the first time in days. The silence was different here. Not the kind that hangs heavy after a fight, the kind that feels like safety. My phone lit up almost immediately. Missed calls, voicemails, texts from Diane growing more aggressive with each bubble. "How could you embarrass us like that? We're stranded at a restaurant. Call me immediately." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began writing. The email was clear, direct, and meticulously itemized. I listed every charge I had willingly approved: the original reservation for the family suite, the group excursion I'd consented to, the standard meals that included me. Then I separated out the rest: the spa treatments, the luxury shopping spree, the first-class upgrades, and the extended group activities. I stated, plainly, that I would not be covering any of those charges. Then I wrote the sentence that scared me and freed me in equal measure: "This will be the final time I provide financial support without a prior agreement clearly defined by both parties. Moving forward, any shared expense must be discussed and approved in writing before I contribute." I reread the email 3 times. Not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to savor what it felt like to finally draw a boundary, one that wasn't made in apology, one that didn't require begging to be understood. I hit send, and then I turned off my phone. An hour later, there was a knock on the door. I knew who it was before I checked the peephole. Martin. He stood on the porch of my bungalow, like a man used to walking into rooms uninvited. I opened the door, but didn't step back, didn't gesture for him to come in. "We need to talk," he said, tone clipped. "I'm listening," I replied, still standing in the doorway. "Your mother is extremely upset." "I imagine she is," I said calmly. "Financial consequences tend to upset people who aren't used to having them." He blinked, thrown off by the steadiness in my voice. "This little rebellion of yours, it's not a good look. Rachel, you're making a scene." "No," I corrected. "I made a decision. One that doesn't require your approval." His voice shifted, softer now. "We've always been proud of your success. You know, we just wanted to celebrate it with people who matter to us. By excluding me from activities and billing me for it." He said nothing. I let the silence stretch. "You see me as a resource, not a daughter. And for years, I let you. But that ends now." His jaw tightened. "We raised you. No, you benefited from me," I said. "And now, I'm stepping away from that role." He turned without another word and walked down the path, shoulders stiff, hands clenched. I watched him go, then closed the door gently behind me. This wasn't just distance. This was separation. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I'd lost something. I felt like I'd finally reclaimed it. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds and wind rustling through palm leaves outside my bungalow window. No voices, no obligations, no group itinerary to follow. For the first time since landing in Kauai, I didn't reach for my phone. I reached for possibility. I brewed the in-room coffee, nothing fancy, but warm and mine, and sat on the patio as the sun spilled gold across the garden. I didn't have to explain where I was. I didn't have to apologize for existing. The air tasted different, like freedom. That day, I went to the cultural demonstration I had wanted to attend from the start. I listened as local performers shared the history of hula. Not the commercialized version tourists clap for, but the real stories, the ones rooted in ancestry and resilience. I sat on the floor cross-legged, eyes wide, letting their words and rhythms wash over me. And for a moment, I thought, this is what connection is supposed to feel like. Not coerced, not transactional, just real. Later, I walked through a craft market by myself, lingered at every table, spoke to the artists. I bought a small carved turtle for Claire and a hand-stitched pouch for Naomi. Nothing extravagant, just thoughtful, just mine to choose. That afternoon, I tried paddleboarding for the first time. I fell, twice, then 3 times more, but I laughed, out loud. The sound startled me at first. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd heard myself laugh without caution, without checking if someone else was approving. Dinner was room service, fish tacos, fresh fruit, a mango soda. I ate barefoot on the patio while the sky burned orange and pink. No one criticized my portion. No one told me I was being dramatic or difficult. There was no performance to keep up, just peace. Of course, my phone was waiting. My mother had sent 6 messages. The first few were sharp. "You've embarrassed us beyond repair. I can't believe you'd do this to your own family." The later ones turned more pitiful. "What will people think? We raised you better than this. We're stranded." I didn't respond. But what stopped me cold wasn't from her. It was an email from my father. Subject: I'm sorry. I opened it with the same caution I'd carried for years, braced for manipulation, for guilt. But what I found was different. Rachel, I've never been good at apologies. Your mother would say it's because I think I'm rarely wrong. Maybe she's right. But what happened at that restaurant, seeing you walk away, it did something. It made me realize I don't recognize the woman you've become. And maybe that's because I never really looked. You're not that little girl asking for permission anymore. And I shouldn't treat you like she still needs our approval. I don't expect forgiveness right now. Maybe not ever. But I wanted you to know I see it now. And I'm sorry. Dad? I read it 3 times. Then, slowly, I opened a reply window. Thank you for your message. I wrote, it means something to hear you acknowledge the pattern. I love you both. But I can't keep being treated as a resource. If there's going to be any relationship moving forward, it will be on new terms. Clear boundaries, mutual respect, no more blurred lines. I'm willing to rebuild, but only if it's honest. I hit send, and then I closed the laptop and went for a walk on the beach. The tide was low, the stars were rising, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like someone's daughter trying to earn love. I felt like a woman who had finally stepped into her own life. Back in Denver, everything felt quieter, but not empty. The city moved at its usual rhythm, the rumble of light rail, the scent of roasted beans from the cafe on my block, the click of my apartment door closing behind me. But something inside me had shifted. The weight I'd carried for years, the unspoken obligation, the invisible ledger of guilt, was no longer strapped to my back. I unpacked slowly, not just my suitcase, but my thoughts. I folded beach dresses alongside memories, lined up toiletries next to boundaries newly drawn. There was no dramatic moment, no fanfare. Just a deep, steady sense of something I hadn't known how to name before: peace. I returned to therapy with new clarity. Dr. Patel listened as I recounted what had happened: the frozen card, the confrontation, The email from my father. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't say, "I told you so." She simply said, "That was brave." And it was. Setting boundaries after years of being trained to break yourself for others. It takes a kind of bravery no one applauds. But I didn't need applause. I needed truth. At work, things blossomed. Without the constant emotional drain, I had more space to focus, to lead, to grow. My manager noticed. So did my team. I wasn't just efficient. I was present, grounded, confident in a way that didn't demand attention, but quietly commanded it. Claire and I became closer. We met for coffee every Sunday, not out of obligation, but choice. We talked about family, about the years we'd spent on opposite ends of the same survival story, and how we were learning to rewrite it together. Naomi, my anchor through it all, was still by my side. We laughed more, planned a future trip, just us, no scripts, no shadows. I created a new rule for myself, one giving account. A small fund each month, set aside for generosity I chose, never demanded. When it ran out, I didn't pull from my savings, I pulled from my self-respect, and I learned to say no, not in anger, not in fear, but with the quiet authority of someone who finally understands that no is not rejection. It's protection. It's love, directed inward. I was no longer the daughter who answered every call, wired every dollar, rearranged her life for the illusion of closeness. I was still Rachel Whitmore, same name, same heart. But now, finally, my life belonged to me. And that, more than money, more than approval, was the truest form of independence I'd ever known. I used to think independence was just about money, but now I know. Emotional freedom is worth even more, and saying no to what drains you can be the most loving thing you ever do. If this story felt like yours in any way, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear you're allowed to choose peace.